Oi, oi, it's your boy, Slacky J, and it's the Jack Slack podcast coming at you on Monday, the 11th of October. And even though this is an MMA podcast ordinarily, we're going to be talking about boxing because boxing was mainly what was happening at the weekend. We will get into Mackenzie Dern versus. Fuck, I'm going to need to learn this lass's name. She keeps winning. Hold on. Marina Rodriguez. There we go. I was going to say Michelle Rodriguez, and then I remembered, no, that's that lass from the films. But the main thing going on this weekend was obviously Fury versus Wilder. The UFC didn't even bother trying to put a card up against it. It was a strange thing, the Fury Wilder thing, because I was very unhyped for it, and talking to friends who like boxing, there was very much a feeling of like, why are we doing this again? I know that they're, 1-0-1 technically, but they're basically 2-0 or 2-0 to Fury. But, and that descended into further ranting about rematch clauses, which are my least favourite thing in the world. I'll ramble about it here again, but it's just like, for everyone who's always like, oh, I want the Ali Act in MMA, I want fighters to negotiate fight by fight individually. The problem is that if you have any pull or any star power or weight and you've got a belt, you slap the rematch clause in there, and then if someone beats you, they have to beat you twice. There's no way around it. Like Andy Ruiz beating Joshua immediately has to do it again. Usyk beating Joshua immediately has to do it again. Usyk might be a much better boxer than Joshua. There might be interesting matchups on the horizon for him, but he's got to fight Joshua again because that's the way that the lawyers wrote the contract and the only way that they'd agree to have Usyk fight him. Bit of a pain because it's not a fluke because he's already lost to Ruiz once. And the same was true here with Wilder versus Fury. The rematch clause existed, but where the first fight was a draw and the second fight should have been that activation of the rematch clause by Wilder, it didn't get activated because the first fight was a draw because the judges were just, in whoever's pocket. Judging and reffing in boxing is just, it's like MMA too, but, where you can never tell if someone's actually corrupt or just incompetent, and the commission will always tell you that it's incompetence, like that's a good thing, In fact, Russell Mora, who reffed this fight, I thought he actually did an okay job reffing this fight, and except for not stopping it when Deontay Wilder was dead on his feet. But Russell Mora, seeing him do fine in fights like this just leads me to believe in even more that when he let was it Mares hit Agbeko with about 50 low blows in their fight, and then he got dropped off a cup shot, a very clear cup shot, and Russell Mora started counting for the knockdown. And after that fight, I think it was Keith Kaiser at the time. Do you remember hating him? He was the head of the commission, and he basically said, no corruption, it was just incompetence. We'll have him watch a VHS about about reffing fights, and that'll all be better. So yeah, that's basically why a lot of these big fights end up with really dodgy scorecards. Like when McGregor and Mayweather happened, there wasn't a way on earth you could score the first 3 rounds or so to Mayweather because he didn't do anything. He was just walking after him, checking what his reactions were to things, and then he turned it on after about 5 or 6 and slapped the shit out of him. But you'd have to be just delusional or in someone's pocket to score those first 3 rounds for Mayweather, and one judge did. But anyway, rant about rematch clauses aside, this one's in the bag now. It is 3-0 or 2-0-1 by Tyson Fury, and it was actually a pretty fun fight, and that's where I was torn up because I was like, well, they do have the capacity to put on a fun fight, and Deontay Wilder did represent himself better than in the second fight. In the second fight, the first fight had been Fury dancing and putting on a boxing clinic, but still having his moments of trouble. And it looked like, oh man, he's going to have, he's got to do the same again, but he's got to do it perfect so he doesn't get caught. And in the second fight, he came in heavier, and he basically said, no, I'm going to push him back and make him fight on the back foot and get in his face and be too much in his face for him to land good counters. And that's exactly what happened. And this third fight, I thought, there was a lot more of the second fight in it than the first. There wasn't an awful lot of dancing or triple jabbing or anything like that. But I thought Wilder adapted decently to the second fight. He still doesn't have enough tools. That's the thing we I started with and ended with on the last podcast. I was like, he just doesn't have enough tools. He's got the right hand. He's got a probing jab. And the things that I said, like, if you wanted to pull Wilder back into this fight with what he's got, I'd like lots of body jabs. I'd like lots of right straights to the body. I'd like him to try and slip inside and throw the right straight to the body and come up with the left hook afterwards. But again, he doesn't really use the left hook at all. It's mainly the right hand. But in that first round, he came out and he body jabbed and he backed Fury up. And the great thing about the body jab is that you can hurt people with it. Yeah, sure. You can tire people out. You can wear on them, which is good if you're dealing with someone who's very mobile and got a very good gas tank, which Fury does at heavyweight, which is ridiculous because he's the biggest heavyweight and he still has a great gas tank. It sets up other shots well. And of course, the issue with head movement with Fury being the slicker boxer and having head movement and counters is that you can't really head movement your chest out of the way. So I was quite pleased with that early going because you can physically push him back with the body jab and then get him to the ropes and try and hit him with decent right hands from there. But after the second round, he basically forgot about that, which was a real shame because right then I was like, oh damn, maybe Malik, is it Malik Scott, the guy who's coaching him now, who people suspect threw a fight to Wilder back in the day? They fought each other and Wilder barely touches him, it looks like, and he goes down very early and then rolls around the floor like, no, I could never get up from that. But I thought he did. I was like, oh, damn, maybe he's done a good job here preparing him for it. But after that, it basically fell apart. The other thing that did impress me was that he really learned his lesson about the clinch, and he was helped a lot by the referee. This is one of those things where I had a couple of people say, like, but Jack, holding and hitting with the uppercut is illegal, and clinching technically is illegal, and so on. And yeah, it is. It's one of those grey rules. And by grey rules, there's a couple of ways you can mean grey rules. There's things that you can get away with, like you can headbutt the shit out of people in boxing, and especially in MMA. MMA refs are absolutely clueless about headbutts, but most fans miss most of the headbutts. There are people who watched Evander Holyfield's entire career and thought that, like, the couple of headbutts they were shown in slow motion were just like, oh, unfortunate. Was he just trying to get inside position and his head collided with the other guys? You know, well, no, he's done that a billion times and he headbutts them a lot. That would be a grey area, like, because it's hard for refs to see and to actually punish you for it and to call intent, which is something that I've talked about before in my career as an analyst. I can say, like, I can tell you why something's working, but I can't necessarily assign intent for a lot of things. Like, was he throwing that right hand because the guy was circling out in that direction, or did he just want to throw the right hand at that time and the guy happened to circle into it and so on? You can build it up, like, confidence in someone's intent by if they keep doing that at that time. You go, oh, yeah, it's probably what he's going for. But you can't really, you can't get inside another man's mind and read it. But the clinch is a grey area in terms of, like, it isn't enforced. It is in the rules as a foul to clinch. I think the wording is excessively, but clinch generally is a foul. But it's also accepted as part of the game. Everyone recognises that that's an important part of boxing. So it's really down to the ref to enforce it as much or as little as he wants. And some guys, like Kenny Bayless, are absolutely terrified of the guys coming together. Other guys, like Joe Cortez, I think it is very good at letting people work. I thought what Russell Mora was doing here was good, in that there were a lot of clinches that came together, and he'd go, your hands are free. He'd tell them their hands were free. Because, like, there's a lot of times when, especially if guys get warned for excessive clinching, they'll come together chest to chest. Alex Pereira was doing this in his last kickboxing match. They'll come together chest to chest, and then they'll hold their arms out like Christ the Redeemer, to say to the guy, to the ref, I am not overwrapping his arms. I'm not pinching his gloves in my armpits. He's not being held here. He's choosing to stand chest to chest. He can back up. But Russell Mora seemed quite intent on not letting Fury lean on him and abuse him too much. There were still some nice collar tie uppercuts in there, which we always love. And actually, Deontay Wilder landed a couple of good uppercuts in there, and I thought, nice, but he still isn't very good. Well, I mean, he's not competent in the infight even. Basically, anytime they got to the inside, it was Fury's to enjoy. But what I did like about Wilder was that he wasn't ducking into clinches, which is where he was getting bent over in half pretty regularly in the second fight. Fury would just lean on the back of his head constantly. And if I said it last week, but if you've never wrestled, or even done neck wrestling for like Muay Thai, having someone hang on the back of your head is exhausting, and it very quickly drains like any athleticism you have. Like, imagine doing a good deadlift session or something like that lights up your posterior chain, fatigues you, and then going out and trying to run track or something like that. It's uniquely exhausting having someone pull down on the back of your head and lean on you. That's why a lot of old school boxing coaches, their answer to it was like, if you get yourself in that position, well, firstly, you've got the guys who are of the school who are like stand up at all costs. And so you get those great images of people like Miguel Cotto. If people try and pull him down, he will stand up and lift them off the floor, because that is less tiring for his back muscles than being pulled over, stooped in half. But then you've got another quite old school attitude, which is to just drop down to a knee and put your hands on the floor, because it's never going to be ruled a knockdown. You don't have to worry about it. But it draws extra attention to how this guy is trying to wrestle you. I think a lot of guys get in trouble, or certainly the attitude of old school boxers, or boxing coaches rather, is that a lot of guys get themselves in trouble by trying to fight up from that awful position or stay standing, and they tire themselves out in the course of staying standing. Whereas if you just put yourself on the mat, you can say to the ref, look, he's pulling me down. But it is like 50% the referee, whether those tactics and how much the clinch works at all. Fucking Ali Frazier 3, yeah, the Thriller of Manila. Ali Frazier 2 was boring as hell, because Ali had worked out that he could just pull down on the back of Frazier's head anytime Frazier got in close. So they had this huge argument over the ref. I think they got a guy who was like an actor and he never reffed again or before. But they got this guy, and his brief was like, do not let Ali hold the back of the head. And because Ali couldn't hold the back of the head and lean on the ropes, just pulling Frazier's head into his chest, Frazier was able to open up more in that fight, and you got an absolute barn burner out of it. But a lot of this fight was just Tyson Fury coming in behind that slappy left hook and throwing the right hand again and catching Wilder in his weird stance, or turning in his weird stance. He's got such a long-bladed stance that it basically means that his left hook is off limits to him a lot of the time. The couple of times he threw his left hook in this fight, it landed. He'd throw a right hander that he'd come to square, like as they sort of fell in together, and then he'd catch Fury clean with the left hook, because he only threw it like 3 times. But generally he doesn't throw the left hook because he's so side on, and you have to throw. Then if you are standing side on, you either have to square yourself up or throw your right hand to square yourself up. So he doesn't really do it. So he's basically bringing threat from one side of the plate, and because he has this weird long stance, when he's turning around the ring, his balance is all over the place. I think that's a big difference between how he takes the blows and how Fury takes the blows. Now, Fury has an amazing chin. I'm not going to say that he doesn't, but I think that a lot of what helps Fury stand up to blows is that he's often in his stance and in position, and when he gets dinged, his legs are there to catch him. It's one of the things that you really notice when you see someone who fights with bad balance and bad foot positioning. Almost anything will get them off their feet. It's really weird, because I don't think Wilder has a terrible chin. I think that when he gets hit, he gets dinged and stunned by shots that I'm sure stun other boxers as well, but his legs are all over the place when it happens, so he's then stumbling around. A great example would be someone like Chris Eubank, who had an all-time great chin. His fights with Nigel Benn, because he keeps pivoting around the lead leg and like jogging backwards around the ring. So if you stand like side on towards the center of the ring behind your left shoulder and you jog backwards, you're going around the ring to your left, yeah? You're like a dressage horse. And that's how he used to circle the ring. And he'd do that, like pumping out the jab, and Ben would throw the right hand across the top, and it would ding his shoulder maybe, or like, crack him in the head, but he wouldn't really get hurt, but he'd like fall on his face every time it happened. And he'd jump up being like, that was not a knockdown, don't count that, ref, and the ref would be counting it, and he'd just look furious. But yeah, I mean, obviously, Wilder was hurt by these blows. I'm just saying that, if you're on balance, it's a lot easier to play it off. I really liked that Fury was using the right hand to the body, as I'd said that I'd love to see Deontay Wilder do it. But a couple of these, like he'd jab Wilder back to the ropes, and Wilder would try and step off to Fury's right, and Fury would ding him with a good right hook, basically to the kidney. Luckily, Russell Moore didn't really care. But I mean, if you watch Canelo versus Mayweather, Canelo basically, he's struggling to land anything, so he just goes to the body jab and the kidney punch, and Floyd is basically looking the ref in the eye and telling him every time that Canelo's throwing the kidney punch. But by doing that, it meant that when Wilder circled around the ropes again, circled off the ropes again with the pivot, Fury could throw the right hand upstairs. I think that was the last one, or what started off like the last sequence of the fight. He dinged him with a good right hand as he was turning around, having just thrown the right hand to the body before that. But, Fury got caught again a couple of times and, showed off the chin again. But it was very impressive. It's that Wilder, the Wilder magic, what he's good at. He was backing up and he managed to throw a right straight and he really tightened it up. Like his elbow was high and stuff, so it wasn't like mechanically tight, but I mean the angle it came in was tight because he's a very broad-shouldered guy, and Fury is going to typically, his lead hand and lead shoulder are going to be in the way, or I think he was trying to slip at the time it happened, but it's got to come inside his left elbow and left shoulder to land, and he threw it really tight, straight down the center, because, we all remember Deontay for these big, wild windmill swings. But he's landed a couple of really good straight right hands through his career. But really, this fight was just a testimony to, well, Fury's chin and skill, but Wilder's toughness, because in the second fight, he got blown out really badly. And in this one, he also got blown out really badly, aside from the few moments in round 4 or 3, whatever it was. But he really looked game doing it, and it did show you that the towel coming in. I don't want to say saved him in the no, it didn't save him in the second fight, but he could have kept going longer and getting even worse beating, and he did in this one. And that's one of the things that always leaves a sour taste in your mouth after these fights. You're like, yeah, you proved that you could last longer and take more of a beating before the stoppage was forced, but anyone who was like, he shouldn't be listening to anyone who's questioning his toughness. That is just fucking stupid. Idiots on the internet will question your toughness if you lose by knockout at all. Like, you could get sparked clean and people will still be like, he could have got up. He's a quitter. That's what he is. He's a quitter. And this is the same thing with Deontay just generally. Like, he is, yes, he's lacking a lot of skills, but the skill that he does have, landing that right hand fantastically well, will continue to carry him to wins over heavyweights, I imagine, provided it hasn't been like a career-changing beating that he's taken in this last fight, and the last 2 fights, actually. But on the other hand, like it sort of frees Wilder up to do more interesting things. No belt, nothing to defend. But this is the thing about like governing bodies. If you have one of the other belts, you're not going to be ranked in their rankings, but you can be ranked in multiple organizations' rankings if you don't have any belts. So Wilder's almost he's in a great position to do anything, really. Unfortunately, Joshua and Usyk had locked in for that rematch, and you can't really sell a fourth against Fury. So he might have to wait a little while, but I'm sure he could take on a heavyweight contender and blow him out of the water, maybe like the aged Povetkin or Dillian White. I mean, I wouldn't say no to Wilder versus White. And then for Fury, I suppose you pursue the Usyk fight or the Joshua fight. Hopefully he wins. If you want to make that massive money matchup, but then he could take on Joshua. Could have lost the belt and made the big fight. If he just waited like a couple of weeks before immediately pouncing on the rematch, he could have gone, okay, well, I'll challenge for Fury's title and the lineal title and the ring title or whatever it is. But anyway, it was a fun fight, and I don't know if I'm as hype on it as a lot of people seem to be. They're calling it like an all-time great heavyweight fight or whatever, but I was very impressed. I'm continually impressed by Tyson Fury, and I was very impressed by Wilder. Not so much with what he did as who he was. Not so great about the bad sportsmanship after the fight, but clearly the fight means a lot more to him than the money does, this specific fight. So, you can't be too mad about someone being heartbroken about something that they put their whole life into for the last couple of years. And then before we move on, shout out to Tyson Fury, because I said in my last one, I was like, there's so many weapons he's got, and Wilder has so few, and I just don't know, if Wilder can get anything going in this match. And yes, I didn't foresee Wilder cracking him twice in the third or fourth or whatever it was, but immediately after recording that episode, I saw that he was wearing the Versace robe, and I was like, no! And then people said, and Drake wished him luck. And I was like, no! And then he came in dressed as Bellator, the old Spartan plume logo that Bellator had. He wore that entire outfit to the ring with a male belly dancer, which was quite cool, and a whole troop of people. The man was just dunking himself in curses, and he broke them all. So maybe time for a Filthy Casuals guide before the next one, eh? And a resume review on Morning Combat. They curse people too. And maybe if Chael Sonnen picks him, that'll also curse him. So I went to get a cup of tea and a biscuit, and I saw a tweet that said, new NFT drop. And it was a biro drawing of a dude standing giving the thumbs up with his own dick in his mouth. It's just on the back of an envelope too. It's just perfect. Oh, the whole NFT thing this week. Nate Diaz tweeted like this dumbass teddy bear pixel art, and it was like, I'm in the bear army or whatever it was. And his replies were full of people going, oh my God, now Nate's on the crypto. Now we know it's legit. You're going, no, firstly, he was paid to do this tweet. He was given the bear for free, presumably. And even then, why would Nate Diaz doing something be a sign that it's a surefire, legit thing? The only NFT I would ever buy is the original dick butt. If you could get the rights on the original dick butt, you're in, because then obviously people would have to pay you whenever they use it. So this card this week, honestly, you might be better off just talking about dick butt for the rest of the episode. But this card this last weekend, Rodriguez versus Dern. I'll be honest, Tyson Fury respects Marina Rodriguez's hands. No, this was astounding. People were calling it a throwback fight, a real one-dimensional grappler versus a one-dimensional striker. But really, it was two lasses who can't wrestle. It was just really strange. I mean, if you're Carla Esparza, you're sitting at home going, why did I jump on those ankle lock attempts? Because Rodriguez wouldn't have got out from under her if she didn't. Or if she didn't go for the ankle lock attempts. And Mackenzie Dern, I very much doubt she can take Carla Esparza down. Very much doubt she could submit Carla Esparza from the bottom, to be honest. But Dern, it was literally like we said last week. I said, oh, her jab's really good. I like her jab. She's got this nice dipping jab now. It's just a shame that her right hand is crap. She just throws it wildly. Like people, MMA fans who are unironically like, oh, Wilder's such a bum. He really only has that big swinging right hand. Such terrible technique, blah, blah, blah. Watch Mackenzie Dern in this fight. She like jabs or double jabs, throws the right hand and steps through with it and turns her back. And almost every time Rodriguez tries to come back with a counter, doesn't quite get her, but it was just astonishing watching this happen over and over again. And to the credit of Perillo, he was trying to make Mackenzie Dern box into grappling. You know, he wasn't telling her to stand and bang or whatever, but it really was very bad. And like half the times that, the first time she got on top of Rodriguez, she shot in, ended up like going onto the leg, and then Rodriguez dropped to a hip and Dern came up on top. And then Rodriguez could do nothing underneath her. And the second, or the last time of the fight she got her down was she shot a takedown, Rodriguez turned her over onto her back and immediately got swept through with like a single butterfly hook just off the momentum of it. So yeah, really not great. But Mackenzie Dern, I thought, like, because she got on top of Nunes and finished her, I was like, oh, well, good, she's using her grappling, blah, blah, blah. But I really lost faith when Luke Thomas pointed out that she had a lower takedown completion percentage coming into this fight than Ortega did pre-Holloway. And Ortega had finished like one shot in 19 in the UFC or something like that. The fun part was Rodriguez's striking, which is actually pretty interesting. I enjoyed it a lot. She uses that chassé basse or oblique kick, and she uses it very low below the knee. She hammers it into the shin. Sometimes she does like a front kick into the shin with the ball of the foot. Other times she's stamping on the front of the shin. But she really like lunges her hips into it. She kicks fully into it, as opposed to someone like Holly Holm or John Jones, where it's sort of like flicked out. Their hips stay where they are, and they just sort of pump the leg. No, Rodriguez is like leaning back, pushing her hips through into it. Hands looked decent. She was throwing lots of front kicks to the body, which we always like, especially if you're going to tire someone out. And Dern just kept swinging like right hands and trying to turn through on back fists. So, and some good low kicks in there from Rodriguez, traditional low kicks, just on the outside above the knee. I think it's interesting because now people are talking about like, oh, why don't we do Rodriguez versus Jędrzejczyk when she comes back? And to me, that's like, as long as Joanna... Well, Rodriguez has a chance as long as Joanna wants to prove a point by standing with her. Because I feel like Joanna Jędrzejczyk could probably take this last down and cave her skull in from the top. Because Rodriguez on the ground is woeful, and her attempts to stop takedowns have been largely woeful. But I really do like her striking. I was actually really pleased with her striking, so that was cool. But that shit won Fight of the Night, so that'll tell you where we're going here. It was not a great one. Randy Brown versus Jared Gooden in the co-main. Gooden missed weight. Brown, his hands are fun, his movement's fun, his footwork is good. He did a nice thing where he was southpaw, he shot him with a left straight. He did the triangle step across the back of Rosa. Rosa pivoted to face him, and Randy Brown hit him with a right uppercut from orthodox. So skipped across his back like TJ Dillashaw. That was really cool. But mainly, and I remember this from the Oliveira fight, I remember this from a couple of Randy Brown's ones, he's a striker who can't deal with low kicks at all. Now, I understand his toe was compromised by hitting Gooden's iron jaw in the first 10 seconds of the fight, but it's something that I've picked up on before. He's not good at dealing with low kicks, either checking or withdrawing his leg. I feel like he'd be better at withdrawing his leg, and I feel like that's what most people should focus on rather than trying to take low kicks and dissuade people from using them. His own kicking was decent, but it's sort of that like one lopsided kickboxing game. It's like what American kickboxing used to be. You know, you learn to box and then you throw some karate kicks on top of it, and you don't really worry about what's coming back kick-wise. But generally, he was in control of this fight, except when Gooden kicked his leg. Honestly, Gooden could have kicked his leg more than one, it seemed like. Matheus Nicolau versus Tim Elliott was a strange fight. Tim Elliott came out hopping, and it's interesting because that's something that I think every fighter should be able to do, because the double jab and then gliding in behind the high knee, threatening the teep, or actually throwing the teep, are two amazing ways to chew up some distance. And in a sport where everyone is running backwards to get away from everything, that's important, because your best chance of hitting people is when you put them along the fence. And that was true here, because Nicolau was running, like sprinting away from everything that Elliott did. So Elliott could have used it well to get to the fence, and he did a couple of times, but a lot of the time he was just sort of following him around, hopping on one leg. First round seemed like it was Elliott's. Second round seemed like Nicolau was coming back into it. Lovely right straight to the body. Wasn't really able to follow up on it very much, but it was working decently. And then Elliott went back to the corner, and James Krause was like, yeah, you've won both. And Elliott sat on the bottom doing nothing from guard for most of the third round. And I'm going to moan the same way I did about Michael Venom Page, except that Elliott is a really good wrestler and scrambler. He could have opened his guard, let the guy step over the half guard and come up on the single. He could have opened his guard and tried to sweep him. He could have opened his guard and stood up or tried to stand up and created a scramble, rolled through on a guillotine attempt or something like that. You know, I've seen Elliott do things like this, and he opted not to. I don't know if that's because he tired himself out. He has worked at that pace, like strike-wise before, and he doesn't throw with a lot of power. I've seen him do it for 5 rounds in, was it Titan Fighting Championship? He did twice. 2 title defenses there between his UFC stints. It was very strange, but then he could have been winded by the body shots too, I suppose. But yeah, even at the end, he seemed to think that he'd like run away with it, and it wasn't that at all. I mean, I could have seen him winning the decision, but I wouldn't have felt at all confident if I was him or his corner. Nicolau is interesting. This is also his second UFC stint, because the UFC did basically get rid of the flyweights at one point. There were like 4 of them left on the roster, and we just sort of won it back from there. But he won that close decision over Manel Cape, and he won the close decision over Tim Elliott since his UFC return. I could see him being one of those guys who doesn't really blow you away, and then one day it just all comes together and he starts putting on win streaks. But yeah, both those fights, I've seen elements of stuff that I really like, but also he's managed to make them really, really close fights. But keep an eye on him. He's fun. And Elliott is always fun. It's just, I think he's too proud of the way he fights. I think he could be by adjusting the sliders, as I say, I'm motioning at my own mixer board here, but by moving the sliders and being smarter about when he went to grappling and how he struck, I think he could use the tools he has, which are plentiful, to win more fights more reliably. Actually, the way that Nicolau got off the fence in this one, in the moments that he ended up there, were really nice. In the first round, Elliot had the underhook pin and was bending him away with the underhook, and Nicolau grabbed the overhook on the side he was leaning to, turned his hips around, got his head underneath Elliot's, and retracted the arm that was being underhooked as he turned back into him. Really nice. Go watch that first escape off the fence in the first round. What else was on here? Maria Agapova. That's what we're saying now. This fight was... everyone was so hot on Agapova for a while, and then she gassed out hard in her last one and lost. Sabina Mazo, I can't remember seeing, but she's not good. I think I said of this fight that it was like if Shevchenko was still much better than her opponents, but wasn't actually good. That's what I got from Agapova. It made me appreciate Shevchenko more. But yeah, I mean, decent knockdown. Chinned her with a right hook, and then jumped on the choke, which was kind of like unnecessary at that point. The girl just wanted out of there because she'd been proper rocked up. But yeah, fair enough. Alexander Romanov got sort of a gimme against Jared Vandero. Vandero, as he was walking around the ring, he was pasty and he had the belly and the hairline. And I couldn't stop thinking of Andy Richter while he was walking around the ring. But it was interesting because he didn't come out like trying to knock Romanov out. But then when he got taken down, he actually did a pretty good job of building up on his hands and knees over and over and doing stand-ups along the fence and trying to separate the hands. And in that sense, it was a lot like most of modern MMA. It's just the Sakuraba game. Turn your back, they get the back body lock, you got to try and stand up and separate their hands. They're going to keep trying to return you to the mat. And that's basically how the fight played out, until he got tired and sat on and then beaten up. And then there was fuck all else good apart from Charles Rosa splitting that dude's head open with a back elbow, but then going on to triumphantly lose the fight. Yeah, that's about it from that card. Really not great. Luckily, Aspen Ladd main event this week. Actually, I laugh, but I am one of the few people that actually enjoys watching Aspen Ladd. I think that fight is better than it was originally. I don't want to watch Holly Holm outclass someone while also not doing much, ishing from the outside. I'd rather watch Aspen Ladd scream her face off and then either gas out and lose terribly or win by stoppage. But anyway, I've just wasted a good 10 seconds of content from the Boycast there that I desperately need next week, or this week rather. Let's do a question and then we'll get out of here for this week. To the Lando Venata of the Uchimata. Hi Jack, I've been a fan of your work since the Bloody Elbow days, and have recently decided to start writing myself as both a hobby and a way to develop my own understanding of martial arts. Inspired by your Elements of Style piece, I've started writing articles about the most basic elements of fighting and their various uses. So far, I've decided on the jab, low kicks, single legs, cage work, and open versus closed stance dynamics. What else would you say are the building blocks of MMA, i.e. skills or techniques that are common but appear in different contexts depending on the fighter and their goal? Many thanks from a fellow tea-drinking, no-wrestling-having Brit, Matt. Oh man, the Elements of Style piece, that takes me back. I think there was a couple actually. One was the jab, and then... what else did I do? Defense, maybe? Parrying? I can't recall. But, man, I should have finished that series, or I should have just kept it running. Well, I can always do it on my own Fight Primer stuff now. But, yeah, basic elements of MMA. I got it, jab, low kick, that's good. Low kicks especially right now, because of how common they are and how effective they're proving. The jab is the reason that the low kicks are so effective at the moment, because guys have started to use the jab with more confidence and they're blading their stance to do it. And people are low kicking on the counter. Certainly at the highest levels, that is. There are a lot of guys in the UFC who are just still getting naked low kicked. Cage work is a big old subject, but the body lock stuff that, or the single underhook pin and the body lock stuff that the AKA team pioneered and is now basically part of everyone's game. Very important. Using the cage for stand-ups is another one I'd say. The basic underhook get-up from half guard is still so powerful in MMA. And that's something that you can work away from the fence as well. And the building up from your hands and knees, turning your back, giving the Sakuraba position, as I called it. Single legs is an interesting choice. I think, MMA is still largely ruled by well-timed doubles, as in get the guy boxing with you, change levels onto his hips when he comes in to punch, and that's where the good takedowns come from. Single legs tend to be a more technical battle, and tiring for the man attacking them, whereas well-timed double legs in a boxing context are probably the best low-effort takedowns for MMA. Though I do like a post-single and things like that. It's just that you're choosing to engage in sort of a technical battle. Open and closed stance dynamics are very important too. I mean, that's a big old topic to talk about because everything changes open and closed stance. Your opportunities for takedowns as well. If you watch high-level collegiate wrestling or amateur wrestling or whatever, a lot of them stand square and then do a little hop into a staggered stance before they go. So they try and keep from committing one foot to a stance to start with, and then they then they watch what their opponent's got forward, and then they match their feet to however they want to shoot on that. So if you watch like John Smith sort of low single guys, they tend to try and get on the same foot, so like an open stance setup to go for the lead leg. Whereas if you're talking about someone who likes a high crotch, actually John Smith himself likes a high crotch, they tend to get into like a closed stance position. But again, different because it's in a wrestling context and they've got their hands all over each other at the same time. And then you've got guys who do actually set up a very strong stance, like Gable Stevenson. Really puts his left leg out there, left arm out there at the same time, and just hammers on that snap down over and over. But yes, open closed stance dynamics. There's what are they called in judo? It's kind of like Kenka Yotsu and something Yotsu. But it plays such a role in all combat sports. Everything is different. It's not a case of just mirror your techniques. When I wrote the Elements of Star stuff, I think I did one on like blocking, but footwork defensively would probably be my a big one for me. I mean, I've always been about ring craft, but I've always felt like footwork is probably being out of distance is the safest way to deal with anything. There's not a single thing that someone can do to you in the cage that doesn't become ineffective if you take a step back far enough, that is. That's why ring cutting is so important on offense. And obviously there's a lot more to it than that, like guys step in, guys time each other stepping in and stuff. But at its most basic level, controlling the distance and stepping back when the opponent steps in are enough. That's Valentina's whole game, is just being on the end of the opponent's reach and staying there when she wants to hit, and leaving and pulling away and coming back when she wants to bait the opponent in. So distancing and footwork, I would say. And then again, those all change against open and closed guard. Ringcraft, cagecraft would be a big important one. Using round kicks or using any sort of kick to cut the cage more effectively. I think, cage wrestling is a big part. I suppose you got to talk about the bottom game and how that is different in MMA, because the bottom game is losing, is how I describe it. You can't win from the bottom unless you're Charles Oliveira, and even then, you're still working at a disadvantage. I think one of the really interesting things about rolling with MMA fighters, and just rolling a bit different to how you'd normally roll if you were doing like just a no-gi session with guys who want to compete no-gi, is playing around with stuff that you don't normally do. Like in a no-gi tournament context, I would never try and go to my hands and knees and stand up, but it's worth doing with MMA guys because they have to deal with that. And it opens up more stuff for you. I'm a huge fan of the Sakuraba Kimura and the Sumigeshi overhead sweep off that, and the switch. I love the switch. But in MMA, it's much more important that you find ways to create space and get up than it is to, try and elevate the opponent and get on their legs. That's time wasted, especially as so many MMA guys are very strong at staying down on their knees or keeping their base, and they're going to be punching you while you do it. I've said before that like leg entries are really useful in MMA, but I think really like you've got to use a lot of butterfly hooks. You've got to be able to kick through to half guard and come up on the single leg. Single leg off the half guard, single leg, and the butterfly hooks, probably the most important bottom techniques in MMA, and the ability to open one's guard, learning how to do that properly. Because there are a couple of ways to do it, but generally, when you open your guard, you want to slide one knee in front of the opponent to make some space. or to check some space while you move your feet inside. Or you can do the Marcelo Garcia, you go 2-on-1 on one of their hands and just put your feet on their hips and kick out. But so few guys feel comfortable doing that. And I've noticed that like across the board in all sorts of grappling too. Guys who might even have good open guards in the gi, but where they'd open and just throw in like a lasso or something like that before, they don't feel comfortable opening and going to a half guard or letting the opponent advance to a half guard in like a knee shield half guard in no gi and MMA contexts. And then ground striking, I suppose, is a really important one. So like the mounted crucifix is not a big deal in grappling, and you won't ever use it in wrestling because the guy would already be pinned on the mat. But in MMA, it's one of the most powerful positions you can go for. And a lot of guys build their top game once they pass guard around getting to that position. I mean, you can do it while passing guard. The Team Quest special, when you're in half guard, you either push the opponent's hand down or they reach for a Kimura or something. You just put your free knee on top of their hand and you get off a couple of free shots. And that's actually something you can use in grappling. I've enjoyed using that. You put your free knee on their hand, but instead of punching them, you just punch to the crossface. Hug their head, turn it away, start passing. But I'd be very interested to see what people think are like the elements of style for MMA. Because at the moment, for me, it's like low kicks, the jab, fighting off the back body lock, turning in off the underhook on the fence using a head post. I suppose limp legging out of the single leg is another important part of cage work on the fence. Force the guy down onto the single and then hop towards the center of the cage. Get-ups along the fence. Get-ups from the bottom without the fence. Ability to open your guard so that you don't get stuck in the fucking closed guard, thinking that it's an advantage. The closed guard is like holding on to a rope that's attached to you instead of what you're trying to hang on to. It's not very helpful. I actually, while we're on the subject of guard, one of the ones that I really liked, it was a losing effort, but I thought it was a really good job by a completely concussed fighter, was Marlon Moraes versus Asuncao 2. And he knocks him down very early, you remember. And Asuncao does a great job of trying to get up with the butterflies, or the single leg or something like that, the half guard maybe. And then he goes, oh no, I'm getting hit too much, goes back to closed guard, pulls Marlon Moraes in, just long enough that he can like calm him down. And then he immediately puts the butterfly hooks back in, pushes him out, starts coming up on the single again. And Moraes gets the finish, but you got to see like even when he was hurt, Asuncao was working through positions to wrestle up. He wasn't fucking around trying to hold the guy down or stall him out or throw up triangles. But anyway, cheers, Matt. Actually, another one I'd add is counterpunching. Like the counter left hook and the overhand across the top, the cross counter. The two Vicente Luque punches, I think, are probably the biggest game changers in boxing and MMA. When you see guys timing those, they're really making the difference. And I think, I'd put body shots in. Fuck, there's too many things. I put front kicks in, to be honest. They've broken the game, or they did for a while. Now they're just a major part of it. Stance switching, how to do that effectively. You have to be doing it in motion. You can start to switch off kicks. You can start to switch off side steps. You can start to switch off spinning shit. Man, do you know what? I'm going to steal your idea and I'm going to start writing these pieces again, the elements of style. But cheers, Matt. You're a legend. Right, I reckon that'll do us for today. I will be back on Wednesday, Thursday, one or the other, to talk about these fights coming up at the weekend, to take a load of questions, because, we've got fuck all to talk about. And then we got a pay-per-view coming up at last. I think it's that we've got Jan versus Sandhagen, isn't it? And Teixeira versus Blachowicz, and then a couple of other things that look like fun. So I'm really looking forward to that. But yeah, in the meantime, if you want to sign up to Patreon, support the podcast, get access to the Boydcast, the Advanced Striking 2.0 articles, anything else I write, which might include the Elements of Style pieces now, do that. Be a boy. If you want to send an email to the podcast, jackslackpodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to see what I'm writing at any time, fightprimer.com. I am your boy, Jack Slack. Mackenzie Dern looking like a curvy Jiri. Bless.